Great. Well, welcome. So we're sort of charged with getting things kicked off. Talk a little bit about our goals tonight, as well as the history of the coalition, Castle, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the legal discussions, rules in the schools concerning bullying and so forth that Rose is going to do. We're going to talk about current programs and both for the school guardian program as well as the Citizens for Safe Schools, the bill on that. And then we're planning some breakout discussions where we can talk to one another sort of in smaller groups. So the overall goals tonight really are to have conversation. So it's not we're not here to try to present a lot of information and tell you what you need to know or what to think, but really to try to provide a forum so that we can talk together as a community. A very short history. This program is in its third year, 2.5, 3 years, somewhere along the lines. Karen and I decided to try to do this as a grassroots effort in response to an incident we had with our daughter. And so we thought it would be a contribution or something positive to try to draw something constructive from a negative incident and try to do that by sharing information that happened in regard to what the case was with our family, but also to try to provide a forum and a program that would enable parents to be able to have discussions with schools about issues that are affecting student safety and welfare. So when you look at Coalition for Safe Schools, CASTLE is what we call it, it sounds kind of a lot like Citizens for Safe Schools, and we do now have a good relationship going, and we're trying to strengthen that partnership with citizens. What we saw is a need for a place and a pathway to have the discussions with our school administrators and with our teachers. We saw that this wasn't always the case. There wasn't always an easy way to broach issues about what was going on in schools with safety and the bullying. It's a sensitive topic. It's a growing topic. There are things that the schools can and cannot do by law in terms of having that discussion with the public at large or with parents that might not be directly involved in specific incidents. And so what we really wanted to do more than anything is to try to, number one, open up communication pathways so that we can move forward. First, recognize the needs and the scopes of these problems and then find ways forward to work on them in a positive and constructive way. One of the things that we did very early on was to set up this school guardian program that Rose Beersley has been so good and effective in getting going in the school itself. And this provides a presence for Castle. It also provides a resource for students and for staffers and administrators to have another person on hand to help guide and help students in their daily lives in the building. The truth is that in lots of phases of public education, we are strapped for resources. We don't always have the resources that we would like to have to implement our educational programs, to do all the things that we're increasingly being asked to do or relied upon by society to do at school. And so recognizing that, we thought it would be helpful to try to get the ball rolling on a program that's geared towards safety and welfare, school climate, and school culture, knowing that it's getting tougher and tougher and tougher over time to try to develop an environment that is safe and healthy and constructive for all students that are in the school system. So that was sort of our goal and our thinking going in. What we've been doing more recently is more specifically in a more focused way, partnering with Citizens for Safe Schools so that we can be recognized as connected for common goals, and then also to try to develop the school guardian program that Rose has spearheaded with a pilot program that has been at Pondo now for, I believe in its second academic year. So we're very encouraged. We've been able to open up lines of communication with board members at city schools building administrators, Superintendent Hilliard, we've been able to establish communication and understanding about some of these issues that we didn't before have, that we sort of knew about as a family in our lives, but until an incident happened in our family, we didn't really fully know or understand the scope of how much these kind of issues are impacting the lives of almost everybody connected to the school. One of the things we did early on, Karen did a parent survey asking questions about experiences with students coming through the system. We found that there were lots of instances. There were students and families who were being hurt at school much too frequently. We've gotten to the point where we're sort of, I think, more aware of the scope of these problems. We're still working on trying to get a better understanding of these problems, and we're transitioning to what can we do as a community with one another and to help support our school system to move forward on these issues. We recognize that it's not necessarily that difficult to point fingers or criticize or say, why aren't you doing this and why are you doing that? We really need to find ways to solve these problems together in a community approach. And so that's what we're about. We very much recognize and admire the progress that Citizens for Safe Schools has made with their mentoring programs. We see mentoring as a tool that will, I think, indefinitely into the future be very important. But we also see other modes and opportunities for parents, community members, and citizens to be involved with the everyday discussions about these issues and in the solutions about these issues. It can't just rely on an administrator, a building person, a teacher or a group of teachers, or a certain segment of families or students to fix this. This is something that we're going to have to engage and fully realize together. So that's kind of our philosophical basis and our historical approach for where we started with this effort, where we are now. What I'd like to do now, have I covered everything? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that all right? What I'd like to do now is
Rose will get more into the details,
Yes.
some of the really concrete things that we're really trying to do that have been so well received. We just sort of were racking our brains. How do we turn our negative situation into a positive? There is nothing worse in my world to just ruminate on something negative. I always have to try to turn into something positive. And that's what this whole program was about. And I'm also very doer orientated. That's not even really good.
I get it.
Okay. And so, and Rose's going to talk about that with the Guardian Project because it's very hands-on. It's walking with kids, it's sitting in the lunchroom, it's boots and eyes on the ground. So I'm excited for her to tell you.
So before we yield to Rose, I just want to say thank you for showing up this evening. We're busy. We have lives. It's the evening. It's Christmas time. So for people to show up and show care for this issue and these questions that we're dealing with, school climate, school culture, bullying, I think is a credit to you. We know that there's a lot of work to do. We also empathize with, and we've seen in recent times, due to some other instances, some responses by parents who are very angry. People are hurt, and we understand and we empathize, having gone through that as a family as well. We want to get to a place where we can start to really make some significant progress in our local environment on these things. So without saying anything else, I'm going to turn it over to Rose. She's going to tell us more about the work that she's been doing with the School Guardian Project.
I want to echo Mike's welcome and thank you for being here because it truly does take all of us to make a difference and support all of the children. I'm going to attempt to change the language a little bit and try not to use the word bully and bullying. What I'm going to talk about mostly is children whose needs have not been met in whatever way that they haven't been met. So the first definition is going to be, what are we talking about? We're talking about an imbalance of power. This is what happens when we have aggressive and people who are on the receiving end of the aggression. So we have an imbalance of power. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but I like my power. And if I lose my power, I'm not a happy person. And if I'm in a situation in my life, whatever it might be, where my power is not there, I'm going to be a crabby person. And I'm going to be taking that out probably on the people that I love most. My dear darling husband and my children are going to go, wow, is she crabby? Would you go take a break, Mom? So this is called the imbalance of power. And I have skills, I'm past 6 decades and I've got skills that have helped me learn how to deal with my loss of power. But our children don't have those skills. And that's where we come in. That's our job, is to help them develop those skills. Not only the ones who have lost the power because they're now treating someone badly to find that power, that imbalance they want to be able to clear. But we're also talking about the ones who've lost power because they haven't learned the skills how to stand up to or become equal with this person who is aggressive. This is really the fundamental basics of what we're talking about. So I'm hoping that through tonight's discussion, when we break up into smaller groups, we can keep that definition kind of in the back of our head as we start looking for ways to make the changes in our public schools that need to be changed. So let's talk about the legality side of it, which is truly a big important part of this. I'm going to start at the state level. Federal level does not have federal laws governing bullying. They have federal laws governing harassment and assault. Now, where's that line? How do we tell the line? Laws are open to interpretation until a judge's gavel comes down on the bench and says, you're guilty. That's the reality of the government that we have. And personally, I like that government because interpretation of the law does help all of us at some point. Truthfully, my own personal belief is I don't want to ever see a child go to jail, become incarcerated, and have a record. So when we start talking about aggressive behavior, we're talking about two different things. We're talking about verbal, physical, not physical, but verbal and emotional aggressiveness. That's what the determination of the bullying tends to be. Then when it comes to the physical side, then you have to start asking from police officers' perspective, and I interviewed 5 police officers to get this perspective. So I've pulled their, the boots on the street, I've pulled their ideas of what they see. First of all, if you come into a school where there's been a physical altercation, police officers in their investigation are going to be asking some really hard questions. And they're going to be also in the back of their mind, they're going to be thinking, what's the DA going to do? What am I going to be able to push through the court system if I take that first step for arresting or making a charge? Because the truth is, if we say this child's been arrested for harassment, physical harassment, if the child's been arrested for harassment, what's the likelihood that that's going to go through the courts and actually get this child convicted and put into a position where they get the support that they truly need to help turn their life around? Chances are pretty slim most of the time. It has to be extremely violent. So a police officer is not going to put a record on that kid's life right off the bat if there are other avenues. And that's what I would love to see from here. Can we have a policies, and I know Dr. Hillier and Mr. Monteith can maybe address a little bit of it. School district policies have things in place. So the truth is, when it comes to making the identification, from a legal standpoint of view, we say that a bullying is repeated. The truth is, many people don't report bullying, report incidents the first time, maybe not the second or even third time. As adults, we've encountered this type of aggressiveness in our jobs and in other places in our lives. Do we run to our supervisor immediately to report it? You know, we don't. It's only when it reaches a point where it's at such a great level of discomfort for us that we finally make that report. Now, step outside of that and go on to the administrative side, and this is the first time you hear about it. So the administration doesn't have all of this history. Even if you say it's happened over and over again, without it being reported, without documentation, without proof, literally their hands are tied to the policy that's in place. So they have to do step one, report step one, depending on the severity, obviously, there's different things that happen. And then when a second report is done, then there are other steps that can be taken, and so on, all the way up to whatever needs to happen to have this done. But here's really the saddest part for me, and I can tell you this because I have talked to students just in the last month who have literally told me this. At step one, the school districts cannot, by federal law, tell you what the consequences were for the aggressive person unless you are the aggressive person's parent or guardian within the school district. They cannot by law, federal law. I'm not talking local law, state law, I'm talking federal law. Federal law, if, let's say it was my kid's the bully. Could have been, he's in his 40s now, but he could have. Maybe he still is, I don't know. And Karen's child is a recipient. And Karen goes into the school and demands to know, what did they do to my kid? And the school says, oh yeah, well, you know, we put them in detention, we did this to them, they're not allowed to do this, they're not allowed to do that. Well, right now they've broken federal law. They have broken a law that if I decided to press charges and move it up through the courts, things, the federal government could literally come into the school district, not just the school that my child went to, but the entire school district, audit the district, and if they found that they felt that the school district breaks, the law is called FERPA, and help me if I say it wrong, but it's Family Education Right to Privacy Act. Is that kind of close enough? Thank you. So if the federal government comes in and says, yeah, the school district's breaking FERPA all over the place, they literally can pull every federal penny from the school. They have that authority. Don't know that it's ever happened. I've not found that it has. I've not found any records in my research. But that is the potential consequences. If I were the principal or the superintendent or whatever, I sure would be very, very cautious about breaking that law. So that's the legal side of what we're talking about. So the understanding is, if your child is on the receiving end of aggression, you may never know what happened to the aggressor because of legal things that are in place. What you can learn is, how is your child being supported and helped through the process? And if you feel like your child has not got support through the process that you feel that they need, if they're still showing symptoms, if they're still suffering, if it's still going on, then we have other avenues in place to help them. But none of this can happen, honestly, people, unless reports are made consistently and every time. The first time, every time. Because the school district does have a box that they're kind of put in. They really don't have that ability to go outside that box without creating other consequences. Now, we're all creative within the box, but we have to be as an understanding perspective that we know they have perimeters. We love our children. We want everything we can do to get our children the help that they need, including, making this problem disappear so that they never have to deal with it again. However, sadly, the reality of the world is, as an adult, we see it all the time against us, in our lives, in our jobs. And if we can help our children now learn the coping skills, the resilient skills to stand up and say, hey, I'm still okay, in spite of, so that when they reach 60 plus decades, when somebody says, hey, you're fat, old, and ugly, I can say, thank you. You noticed. I'm glad that you can see me standing here in front of you. If you want to see my gray hair, there's a few of those in there too. I've got lots of scars that go along with them from all the life that I've lived, and they're really ugly. That's the hope for our children, is to put the policies in place, put the support in place, and help them become the resilient, fat, old, ugly woman, or gentleman, if that's the case. So, school guardian project, and I know you're looking at your clock, and you're gonna be on time here. School guardian project, I went back and looked at my notes, and it was March of 2016 that Mr. Monteith signed a paper that says, yes, I'll allow you in my building. Thank you, Mr. Monteith. So literally, the project has not been in that building barely over a year. And we've made amazing grounds in the building. We have developed some trust and support from the staff. The staff now come to, and I apologize, I didn't bring a green vest tonight. But if you saw the newspaper, you saw the logo on the back of a green vest. Mr. Monteith, at the beginning of the school year, actually introduced us to all of the students and staff in the building and said, if you see the green vest, that's a safe person, go to that person. We tell students, if you see the green vest, that person has been trained so that you can go to them as a safe person. The School Guardian Project is the only, that I'm aware of, volunteer organization within our public school that has a mandatory training of confidentiality and mandatory reporting before we sign off and say, yes, a volunteer can be in the school under the School Guardian Project. To the best of my knowledge, Dr. Hillier, are you aware of any other volunteer program that trains?
Well, we have CASA and citizens, but as far as.
But no,
like,
to specifically put volunteers in the school.
But yeah, as a straight school worker.
So this is me on my shoulders. If I'm going to be in charge of somebody, I want them to know how serious confidentiality in the school building is. And if you develop a rapport with children and they have something that's going on in their life and they feel that they trust you, the chances of them disclosing that to you go up. And I don't want a volunteer to be totally blown away by something that a child has disclosed. And I want them to be able to have the skills to help that child through the process safely. So those are mandatory from the School Guardian Project, confidentiality and mandatory reporting training. Then we have at our school, to my knowledge, the only one in the state, something that Mr. Monteith, Mrs. Rupp, and Ms. Cannon have created. It's an integrated wellness center. This wellness center is called the Turning Lane. Those of you who have students at Ponderosa, if you've heard the name Turning Lane and you have no clue what it is, we'll talk a lot more later. But the bottom line is the Turning Lane has volunteers that have additional training. The additional training is required trauma-informed care and building resilient children. And until they've had an interview by me and I say, I think you'd be good in that place, until they've had an interview by Mrs. Rupp, the school counselor, and with Ms. Cannon, the school nurse, and those two people say, yeah, I think you would be okay. Until they've had all four of those other trainings, they're not allowed in there. But there's one final step. Mr. Monty has to sign a piece of paper. He has to agree to let them in there. Because the truth is, the turning lane is a very sensitive area for confidentiality. And we work with a lot of students who are not in a healthy, focused, ready-to-learn state of mind. The goal for the turning lane is to give that student time and resources to get into the healthy, ready-to-learn state of mind so that we can get them back in a classroom. The idea is to increase attendance in the classroom, but actually be able to learn while they're there. If they're in a classroom and they're miserable, if there's something, maybe my kid died this morning and I just can't think about anything at all. Math is absolutely worthless because I'm really sad about my kid. I can't focus. A teacher says, why don't you go to the turning lane? So they come down for 10 minutes. They don't have to talk to anyone, but if they do, the school counselor's there. There's actually a counselor, person from Klamath and Behavioral Health that's there that they can talk to. I am not certified, but I've got more years experience than most of you been alive, so I have time to sit with these children. I'm not counseling, I'm just listening to them and helping them with their focus. And after about 10 minutes of therapeutic time, they can play with Legos, they can play kinetic sand, they can put puzzles together, something that redirects their brain. And that's literally what we're doing. We're taking science and we're saying, all right, your brain is stuck right here. We're going to redirect your brain by these activities. They're called therapeutic activities. And there's a lot of science behind the individual activities that they have to. And then redirect the brain. Once the brain is redirected, most of the time, this has been happening more and more, the student, even before their 10-minute timer go off, says, I'm ready to go back to class. We're seeing success in that little tiny room in places that I couldn't have imagined a year ago. And without volunteers sitting at the intake desk to help direct students to supervise that shared therapeutic area, to give the students the support and that friendly face when you first walk in, without those volunteers, that door wouldn't be open. Because the reality is the counselor, the nurse, KBBH, they all have their offices and they're all really busy. So those volunteers are critical. And right now, we don't have the doors open from 8:30 in the morning until 3:30 every single day. There are times when we don't have a volunteer that can be there and the door gets closed. When we first started it, we opened it up. When we first opened the doors, it was literally only a few hours, a couple of days a week. We are now almost 100%. We're getting real close. We started out with, and this is students that go to the nurse, go to the counselors and therapeutic space. We started out with about 9 kids a day, average. We are now averaging 60 a day. And we're still not over 100%. So the idea behind this is not so much, yay, we're helping the child who comes in upset, but we're also moving this whole thing in directions where we're gonna be partnering, we are partnering with OIT to bring in some of their junior and senior year psych students and social behavior students. They're gonna start helping us in ways that we hope to develop some skill building programs and things like that, so that even the students who are using their ability to have higher balance of power over other students. But we know that a lot of times it's because that's the only way they can feel good about themselves, because something else is missing in their life. So we want to be able to find programs and things to pull those students in as well and start skill building, so that instead of punishment, we're actually educating and building resiliency so that we can change that child at that age from ending up the adult in the office that's the bully, or the adult in jail because they didn't get the intervention that they needed.
And Rosa, we also know with documentation of Or is it like we're talking about the recording, you know?
There's data being collected. Data is being collected every day. The data is slowly being assimilated because we're not open constantly. The data is not considered completely viable because you don't have consistency, and without consistency, data is just kind of, well, that's a great picture you're showing me, but I can't really use it in a scientific study. But we are moving in that direction. And part of the reason we're needing a little more time is we want to get a computerized program where the students actually do the logging in, and it's more consistent and better contained.
And what are the other areas that we're looking at?
We have an amazing artist back here who is decorating the office. It's behind the scenes job. It's not direct student contact job. It's paperwork. It's well, Amanda, you can tell us a little more about what you've done now that you've got a cookie in your mouth.
A lot of times I'll just go in and I'll, the secretary sends out a notice to the teacher saying if you need anything copied, do a lot of copy, laminating, entering grades for, like simple grading stuff, restock the library books, just simple things like that, stuff that will free the teacher's time up either at school or at home so that they just have more time to do what they need to do and less time doing the busy work stuff.
So teachers actually get a little more student contact. Lunchroom, cafeteria. We've had one of our volunteers out ill this week, but right now we have cafeteria, all 3 lunch periods covered every day, Monday through Friday. So there's an extra set of eyes and ears in the lunchroom, which averages a little over 200 students at a time. And if you're hard of hearing, it's a great place to be. But our volunteers are making some really nice connections with a lot of students, and they're actually able to overhear things and maybe go to a staff member and say, this student seems to be having a tough day, maybe they could get a little extra help. Sometimes the volunteer creates a relationship with students who need extra support, not necessarily a mentoring role per se, but creates that more safe zone for the student. And we've literally had students who have come looking for that volunteer and said, I will only talk to that volunteer. I don't want to talk to the counselor. I don't want to talk to Mr. Monteith. I want to talk to that volunteer. So volunteers in the school are extremely valuable, and they're opening doors and helping students in ways that we couldn't imagine when we first started. Before I end, on that back table behind our lovely reporter colleague is some paperwork. There is one sheet that has the websites, links for the state guidelines on harassment, intimidation, and bullying, the Department of Education's policies on harassment, intimidation, and bullying, and city and county schools policies as well. So the links to find those are on that page. So if you want to do a lot more research and really become educated on what those laws are, there's the resources for you. There's also a 3-page packet. It's tips for how to help your children who have been bullied or witnessed bullying. There are kind of some data on really what is the problem, how big is it, what's the percentage nationwide, that type of thing. Kind of give you a better idea, because sometimes when we live in our little bubble, we become overstimulated and the picture may be different when you start looking further out. It also has some more resource lists for more things like more tips for parents on how to help your child. And there are 2 surveys back there, one for adults and one for you. If you want to fill them out and leave them here tonight, totally anonymous, We'd be happy to look those over and maybe you could help Mr. Monteith and Dr. Hilliard get a little better feel for at least the group that's in this room. And then we'll go from there. Any questions for me? Yes, sir.
Does it have to be a parent to report sick or?
Absolutely not. We want the student to report it instantly, immediately to the nearest adult next to them. I don't care if it's a parent in the parking lot because they're on their way to home after the attendance at school. And what I tell students are, the nearest adult say, hey, an incident just happened, take me to the front office. Yes?
So along the lines with that, what if the student feels that the teacher's not available? Like if the teacher or if the student tries to go to the teacher and say, "Hey, this just happened. Okay, well I'm in the middle of the lesson. You have to wait." What is the student supposed to do then when they can't feel comfortable enough to report to their teachers?
And that's a really hard problem, and I spent 30 plus years in the classroom, and I can tell you 99.9% of the time I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to address that student and their needs. There's always that chance that there's something else going on, and maybe I'm not at my best that day. Maybe my day is just really a bad day, and I don't have the energy or I'm not thinking open-minded and clearly enough. I'm just wanting to get through the lesson and make it bother me. You know, we're human. As a parent, I've said that to my own kids, hey, shut up, go away. So with those understandings, what I tell students is keep asking until somebody says yes.
Now, in Ponderosa, they can go to the turning.
In Ponderosa, they can go to the turning lane in the staff, and we've
But
got
what about
some
other
staff here.
schools?
This is a pilot program.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
We're hoping
good.
to expand it, I just need money and volunteers.
So the reality is, if your child doesn't feel that the adult closest to them is responding in the way that they need to respond, keep asking. Go to the next adult, go to the next adult. Don't stop until you get out and eat.
It might be.
You have something you want to
I
say?
do. We're talking all these resources for the children that are being victimized. But what are we doing to the children abusing these other children?
And that's what,
That's had an ongoing issue and nothing has stopped.
and that's what we need to do some more talking about, finding things that we can put in place. What policies can we change? How can we add to our schools to put those resources in place? So here's what I know about the aggressive student. Nothing's 100%. Everything that I say does not apply to every student, that's the reality. But in general, the person who is being aggressive typically has a lot of great needs in their life, and this is a symptom of their needs. So what we do when we have this is we start looking for not what's wrong with you, kid, but what's happened to you, kid. And when we find out some of the things that have happened, what resources do we have already in place? What more resources do we need in place? Detention. Boy, detention is easy, quick, fast, and I know Ponderosa Middle School actually had bought a program where you have it in a file cabinet, and Mr. Mueller, the dean of students, says, Rose, come look at it and see what we can do. I haven't had the time. That's my bad. But in that kind of a setting, instead of the kid sitting there and, as somebody told me one time, counting bricks on the wall, what can we do to help that student? So the student is having a problem. Their reaction was to do this. They get detention. I'm not going to ever give an excuse to a student who acts badly. There are consequences in life, learn them now. But at the same process, those consequences usually end up saying there's a follow-up. What's the follow-up? How does that follow-up educate? How does that follow-up give the intervention and support? That's questions that we're asking tonight. Where do we go from here? What have we already done? What's in place? I don't know everything in place, honestly, I don't. I have ideas of what's in place, but I've not witnessed it, I don't know how it works exactly. And I'm hoping that as we continue our conversation tonight and break out into small groups, we can figure out what some of those things are. We can figure out where they need to go from here. We're always gonna be needing to make improvements. We're not gonna find a perfect answer.
I would just add the kind of questions you're asking, those are exactly the kind of things we'd like to see in the smaller groups. I very much appreciate that question. There are essentially carrot and stick approaches. Our administrators and our teachers are charged with ensuring the safety of the kids in the school at a basic level. The issues are that we're not always getting that outcome because of resources, because of policy impasses, sometimes because of lack of communication. We're trying to find out more about those things. Having been a family that's had a victim as well, we definitely know about that. We're looking at all approaches, and your question is a very good question, not necessarily for the school guardians, but for the administrators themselves. So
She's been physically assaulted twice.
we have hundreds of kids whose parents have answered surveys who have reported assaults. Assaults are sadly not uncommon, and we're very sorry to hear about more of those reports. And we understand what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out what we can do about it in partnership with our school leadership.
Right, but is it correct that the next time she is assaulted, she calls 911, the police have to come take a report, and it takes it out of the district's hands?
I can't speak to specific cases. I do empathize with the situation you're in, and I want you to know that there are, in fact, far too many people in a very similar situation, and there is no simple answer, and that's why we're here.
Castle's hope has been always to try to look at some of the policies. For instance, there's some complaint procedures that are really convoluted, and I've always wanted to try to tackle some of the policy procedures because that's not gonna solve the problem either, right? But at least if there's some kind of policy adjustments, maybe that's a new way to take some of these tactics.
A more basic question, did you file a complaint in response, a formal complaint with this?
Not yet, no, I have the email.
You should know that there's a very short window of time that requires you to respond almost
Well,
immediately.
We've had an ongoing issue since school started. I mean,
Okay.
she's slapped, she's called
Yeah.
filthy.
I wanted you to be aware that there is a formal process that has to be followed for you to get some kind of official response.
Thank you, Mike. So to keep moving, I'm gonna end this with, our public schools are tasked with roles that they were never meant to be tasked with. We're talking about creating counseling, we're talking about creating skill training in youth that sadly lacks in a lot of our kids, and this has been going on forever. So in the past, it was you're expelled, you're gone, go work on the farm. You don't get an education. But the federal government came in and came up with these laws that say students have to be in school, they have to be educated to a certain age. And if they aren't in school, if they're not being educated, that means that they're truants, and then other laws, federal laws come into place. So the school districts, and I'm not defending, saying it's right, wrong, different, this is just the reality of the world. The school districts now are tasked with the job of doing a lot of, and I hesitate to use this word, but I'm gonna throw it out anyway, parenting. In the turning lane, we do a lot of parenting type activities to help the youth feel safe, comfortable, and learn skills. We're not teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic the way we used to. Now we're bringing in health, we're bringing in other types of things, sex ed, we're bringing in dental health. I mean, the curriculum that spans, that the school districts are required to do now is way beyond education. in the traditional sense of learning how to read, write, and do math. So as we move forward through this, the reality is there's over 600 kids in one middle school. There are roughly 60 paid staff members in that school. You can't watch them all. You can't be everywhere. You can't do everything for those students. So as we talk about policies and procedure changing and bringing in new programs and everything, there isn't money for those. There isn't personnel to do it. There isn't even space in a lot of buildings to do this kind of thing. So the community needs to help become partnership with the schools to ensure the safety and the ability to learn for every student in every school. I'm not talking about Ponderosa Middle School. I'm not talking about Concord or Roosevelt. I'm not talking about city schools. I'm talking about county schools as well. I don't know what the student population is in Klamath Basin, but I would guess that there is a large majority of our students not having all of the services that they need, and schools can't do it. We have to be partners with them. And my final note, and this is my own thing, this is where my head comes from, this is my driving force every morning when I get up, is schools have the responsibility of caring and educating our children roughly 9 months out of the year, roughly 5 days a week, roughly up to 8 hours a day. I want those people to be able to do the best by my child as possible, because typically, if you take out the hours that our children are sound asleep, they actually have more interaction with them than we do. So if we can become solid partners, not a them versus us, we can make our kids a safer, happier, better educated place in their lives. Thank you.
You're up.
Thank you.
I just want to say, Rose,
Yes, sir.
when you talked about 60-plus decades, why were you looking at me? So I'm from Citizens for Safe Schools. We're a mentoring organization. We believe in 1+1, one-on-one mentoring. We have 52 matches right now. I'm an old hat at all this mentoring and nonprofit stuff because I've been doing it for 2 months now. And
Got it.
I never worked in a school. So I worked in business, so I have an entirely different outlook on things and a different way to look at stuff. So when I started, one of the things that I looked at was the Guardian program at Hondo, and I was blown away. It's like, wow, this is incredible. Because I did have 2 kids go all the way through, one of which had issues, and the other other did not, well, except for some teachers, but the other did not. So with what they're doing, I don't think they talk enough about the difference that can make. The tough part is it's got to start somewhere. It's got to start somewhere. So if we work on it as a systemic thing to do, to work with to get it and learn from what we messed up on and expand on what works, this is going to be real successful, but we all need your help. So the things we have going is Kids in the Middle. That's our flagship program, which is one-on-one mentoring. But if anybody wants me to mentor, that'd be awesome, which is 1 hour a week, commitment for a year. We're also putting in place a workplace mentor, which ties in, which is part of why we got involved with doing Guardian things, which ties in is a lunchtime, going and have lunch with a kid. So that all it is school year, going to have lunch with the kid, then we have an adult there, and we all know that that works so much better when there's an adult around, than just kids. We also are working with OIT with part of they have a new outreach program that they want to get their students into the community. Well, that's part of getting into the community, but Rose talked about bringing the OIT students into Ponderosa. Just finished writing a grant to help fund a big chunk of the Guardian project so that we can staff it all the time. so that they have, yeah, cross our fingers, so we can staff it all the time, so they have what they need, so we can do some work on attendance and all those things. So we're crossing our fingers with that. The biggest thing, we need your help. We need your commitment, your things that, your ideas, so that we can get better. I know as a parent, having had 2 kids come out, probably the number one thing is just be involved. I felt sorry for my daughter, she was the youngest one. And up through, because I was involved with the schools really heavy, because my son had issues, so I was involved with the schools really heavy. And it's like, all the kids go, oh no, you know who her dad is? Oh, you know, look out for that guy. So I kind of felt for her, but she didn't have a problem while she was cool. But part of it is, I was there all the time. So you don't expect that from other people, but don't be afraid to get involved and ask the questions and do something. And not, I didn't have issues with going in and talking to principals and whatever, and the big thing is that whole follow-up thing, and it's really hard to be objective when it's your child. Really hard. But you have to understand that you have to be objective and look at, okay, how can we do this so that it works for everybody? Because that's how the school district has to look at it. It's got to work for everybody. If it doesn't work for them. We also have, just starting today, and this is Stephanie's idea, just starting today, we are going to do a peer mentoring project with, the first one's going to probably be Masama, but I have to talk to him first, where it's a group of kids, because the whole deal is, one-on-one's great, but we need to hit more kids. We need to tap into more kids. So we need to do it with the ability to do it with less volunteers. That's the big issue that we need to do, and try to bring those things out. But there's only so many of us and so many things to do, and we don't have all the great ideas. That's what we need from you as a whole. I'm big into solution-oriented. Man, it's one thing to know what the issues are, but we all are pretty clear on what the issues are. And if we knew the solution to do it, those that are involved, it'd be done. And we wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. So we need help with that, to how we can get past that. That's all I had to say. How about that? Short.
Buses, all of it, top 5 issues, and then your top 5 ideas. What are your top 5 ideas to address, maybe not those issues, but just ideas that you've had, like wouldn't it be great if I had X, Y, Z, or something like that. Okay, and I'll get some paper and we'll be back here in about 2 minutes.
Yeah, I love.
Redirected program
Redirective program.
for the bullies, not necessarily like if you have these like kids knowing how to like effectively be decent.
A kindness, kind of a kindness program. Okay, great. Okay, what's your next? Did you have another? Oh, that's it, great, okay, I love it. And we'll talk more about it in a minute. Okay, Wayne?
There's no reason, no cell phones. We have a daughter in another school because of some issues, and it's been great. There's no reason at that age group to have cell phones
So,
during that. I don't know at lunch, but keep them in the locker. That was the first thing that the principal told us in the briefing. It was refreshing to finally hear something like that. We will take the phone.
Yeah.
Put it in the locker, it helped out a lot of the drama. And
sounds
communication of the bullying and stuff.
right, so it's locked in. What happens if a kid takes it out?
They'll be in a lot of trouble. I don't know, but find out.
Because this is the problem with the Snapchatting and the, recording of all their misdeeds. Okay. What, did we come here? Did you have another?
That's good.
What else were we talking?
Well, lack of parent involvement, I mean, I can't.
Okay, I wrote some of them down. I wrote some of them down. We had an idea for a school-wide meditation minute. So the bell goes on. Ding. You're supposed to stop, and maybe someone says, "Today you're valuable." Sit there and be quiet. No. Or they write a nice note to something.
Or they, like a positive message or just, like something nice about another student.
or another faculty member.
So the idea is that we just take, everyone in the building takes a collective deep breath, like, okay, we're gonna have a great day today, and we're gonna start right now.
To refocus and redirect it, like, like say, an example maybe is like, as the teacher notices like the class is just getting a little bit more unruly, or just a lot more talking, like, okay, let's take a meditation minute, or let's take a minute.
Yeah, we didn't talk about doing it in classroom. Anyway, I love this idea.
Like, like a minute or two, not a lot of time.
I thought that was
Just to have like a redirect.
innovative. So on the communication side, we were talking about, the reporting, some of it's a little, like, do we know when, where, how are we getting it? So, everyone loves their social media, which is also on our problem side. We thought about, what if we had a way to privately message the administrations of the different buildings, if parents and students had a way to privately message, like, I don't want to go on a document, I don't want to fill out an incident report. Okay, what if I just send a quick private Facebook message to whoever was designated? I thought that was brilliant.
Or what if our child reports to us as a parent, child comes to the parent, and then the child doesn't want the parent necessarily to go to condo and report because the child is embarrassed. So this, if we messaged, then the child wouldn't necessarily know that we are throwing the child off. So it would keep the confidentiality a little bit more.
And
Email.
Email would work too.
I email. all
Yeah,
my
email.
complaints.
And we did have a program called Text to Tip that's been converted into Safe Oregon payment. And that is it still a text message system?
Text, email, and there's a web interface as well.
So, but if we Googled Safe Oregon, all the information about how to report for the instant reporting would come up.
And Karen, posters are, at least I know in Ponderosa Middle School, posters are all over the halls.
Has anyone seen them in other buildings?
They're definitely at Henley, the high school and the middle school. They're supposed to be in all the schools.
Okay.
And there's an app, there's a cell phone app for Safe Oregon for reporting.
Okay, so that's really good. That's another tool. We talked about, and this isn't really a solution, it's an idea
So I'm thinking another solution is to make sure kids are aware.
of this.
So somehow communicating that to.
Reminding them.
Like
Or
assembly
reminders,
piece.
yeah.
Maybe we can post it on the school's Facebook page.
Yeah, we'll post it. We will do that tomorrow. Heather, can we do that tomorrow? We will post this information on the Pondo parent page and Katie,
Or
their
other
page,
schools.
whatever pages that we're using, we'll post this and then try to repost it every 6 months or something, just to try to remind people to use that. We talked about somehow creating a protective culture within our schools. So this was the innocent bystander scenario. Something's going on. Why did everyone stand around and yell? Why didn't you guys get in there and pull the kids off?
Right.
So that's not really a solution, but it was an idea. And then we also talked about how the kids are only chatting each other, and we're really lacking this face-to-face. It's really hard to be mean to someone when you're looking them in the eyeballs. It's way easier to write me notes, social media, whatever, jiffing whatever to them. How do we, again, this is not really a solution, but how do we create the space, time, whatever, to do this?
I think we're talking about like peer mentoring, which I think I hear some are
Right.
going, there's programs and stuff, I know at Pondo. We didn't know what it was called.
Web,
It's
Is
web
it
doing
web?
some
Yeah,
of that,
that's
right,
that.
with 8th and 6th
86,
graders.
And then there's the upstanders club as
Oh,
well.
upstanders code, that's the one I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. But peer mentoring, having that be a solution more so, perfect.
Okay, that was our list. Good work, team.
Wow. Overachievers.
Okay, Bill, you're
Ours, we worked on, the biggest thing to me was a systemic change. And with the model of Mothers Against Drink Driving, a
very
victim
successful
impact
group.
panel, to let them know what the results of this are. That was the big thing for MAD, was to show, look, look at this accident that killed these 3 people, whatever, but show the results of doing that so that you follow this path, this is where you're gonna end up being.
So you want, as we institute ideas or whatever,
Yeah,
we need
that's a
good
systemic
data.
change,
Okay.
because you can't you gotta start young.
So we need
So
to
let them
get
see that.
a family group like mom, Mother City Schools.
I mean, there's an idea.
Yes.
There's an idea. And, and
Yeah,
the same-
that's all.
We've had a suicide at
Yeah.
Mazama. I know this is one of my hot topics that we need to talk about. Go ahead.
And that could theoretically be the face of that. I mean, we'd have to talk to our parents,
Mhm.
but that could happen, and it's very real.
I've heard from several people in Mazama and KU about the suicide things, and it's very concerning to me. I did some quick research about a month ago, and they were reporting, who was it, gals, when I sent you that link? It wasn't was it CDC?
Yes.
They were reporting a 65% increase in teen girl suicide, and particularly in rural areas. This is an issue that we're gonna probably need to circle back around on. Totally preventable, right? But how? Okay, no.
The other thing we had is family education. You're helping them the same type of thing, understand what's going on so that we can open the lines of communication to make it a little safer to talk or whatever, how to get past that.
Great. And we've done a couple things. It's hard to get the parents to attend. So maybe we need to think about
How else?
But it's how else to do
How
it.
do
If
we-
you
how else
count
do
on
we
parents
deliver that?
attending, we're gonna see the same people every single time.
If everyone
Guaranteed.
wants to complain, everyone wants to post it on Facebook, but nobody wants to come and voice the issue.
Yeah.
I'm concerned, I'm here.
that, and I.
So how do you reach those who?
Market
That's
your
the question.
product, we got a product, we got a market,
That's
people
what
gotta
mom's
know.
for.
If I wouldn't be here, if she didn't call me today. I
Thanks.
didn't hear about it.
Yeah, oh man, it's
So like
always
more
had it's in the
awareness.
paper 3 times, but if you don't get the paper,
Exactly.
this is a problem in my other work,
Mhm.
is everyone has their own very specific lines of communication. I'm only Facebooking, I'm only reading the paper, I'm only, and it's a really hard problem to get your message out for a marketing
We just
side.
have to be flexible and look at a lot of different things.
Just try to hit it on
The
everything.
different type of people do different things, and it's not just the different venue, it's how you speak to them on that venue,
Right.
It's a whole different.
Right, this parent one, it could be a
Yeah.
whole little separate
There's,
thing all by itself.
we looked at it from the standpoint of having to do with some kind of systemic change that we can move forward and work towards, that was the big deal. What did I miss? You talked forever, so I.
I wasn't finished either.
Well, in your work, I'm sure you have a lot of insight into
Exactly.
what are we struggling with?
Struggling with, in the long term, trauma. What we're talking about here is the creation, the beginning.
Trauma-informed care.
Well,
Where do we
if we
talk
can
about
stop.
issues in the community, criminal activity, drug addiction, mental health, this is where it starts.
This is the direction we're putting
And
them
we're
on.
not
Yeah.
resolving this with these children. We're just preventing them from going to juvenile hall and seeing what they may be looking at when they turn 18. We're stopping this. We're saying it's okay, you can victimize our children all you want because we're not gonna let you touch a case.
And we need to get to the
I
bottom
don't
of
think they're
it.
trying to, I don't,
That's what I've been
I
told
don't
several
feel that
times.
because I think people are trying to find ways, that's why we're having
We
this.
need leadership.
People are
Yeah.
trying to find solutions so that they can reach kids in a way that they'll understand, so they don't have to see it. You know?
That's what we're here, we're here to not let our children be victims, we're trying to figure out a way to solve that problem.
So to make a stand, so we can show our children how to make stands for themselves.
Kids are kids, and whether you think they're, making good choices or not, they're still children. And they still need to learn by someone, whether it's the parents, whether it's us as a community, whether it's teachers, the principal, whoever.
They do, but here's the problem, aside from the kids that are being bullied and the ones that are doing the bullying, is that, like, my son is watching his cousin be bullied and verbally attacked at school, and so he's having to be put in that situation where, like, well, what is he supposed to do, And,
As an
so,
onlooker.
because, so when he has to be like, no, don't retaliate and don't hit him, because that's what we're trying to teach him how to do.
Yeah.
But, so it's creating a lot of problems in a lot of different areas than just the bully and the one being bullied.
Yeah.
And it's just getting
It's sort
worse
of
and worse.
mushrooming out.
Yeah.
So it's all fear-based, it's like, somebody mentions something, and you see something going down in the hallway, how come no one stepped in? Well, there's a lot of fear there. So, I have this vision of taking these 600 kids and putting them into a gymnasium all at the same time and educating them all through, the voice of victims. Because really, the bully and the victim are both victims. Because that bully wasn't born that way, and I hate to even call him a bully, I hate that name. Somebody said, Rose said it, a kid with unmet needs. This is a kid that's starving for attention, and negative attention is better than no attention.
attention he probably gets, or she probably gets.
So if you educate this whole environment, and you make it really good with stories and how it affects the kids and how it affects the family and how it can affect the future, you're gonna create some feelings, some emotions are gonna get attached to that. And then you will have people that will overcome fear and say, hey bro, don't do that. That's not cool. Leave her alone.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, the protective culture and peer mentoring thing that Bill's talking about and that you just mentioned, I honestly think that's the sleeping giant. That the ones who are not the victim and not the bully are the largest group by far and have an incredible amount of power. If you get them in that situation and they start feeling a critical mass together that, hey, we have the power to stop this together, because if it's a one-on-one thing, it's not there. But if you create that culture, somehow, I don't even have to that yet.
Create the culture.
But it is the
KU's
culture.
done something, like the freshmen, they had some, I don't know what it was called.
We've
But
had
it sounded like there
we've
been,
had,
yeah, something's going on.
There's,
We're getting them going.
okay, Stephanie, did you have any? You can always message me later. Okay. Did you guys have any solutions that you wanted to throw out there for us? Right.
There you go, Ray. Not the first time.
I have teaching children to communicate effectively. I think a lot of children don't understand how to actually communicate, besides being physical, besides saying what exactly on their mind without being tactful about what they want to say, without realizing what I'm actually saying is hurting them. Because they say, oh, I think your shoes are ugly, and I think your personality, be like, I don't care for your shoes, and I don't really want to be friends with you. Can you give me one?
You have to teach them to find their voice.
Thanks. At the top of our issues, and I'm starting there because that's also where our solutions are, developing self-regulating skills in students.
We're sort of talking about that was your teaching.
That skill building was at the top of our needs. So then we are having some success in that direction, as Rose mentioned. We want to reach everybody who has that.
So is the Turning Lane kind of helping with some of that?
Other solutions, more adult presence in more parts of the school all the time.
We actually had a request from one of the children for, and this is gonna be the hardest one to tackle, is the 4-minute in between periods. Anyway. Okay, more adult friends, awesome.
possibilities of peer counseling / mediation, whatever the program that's being piloted at Mazama. Have there been successful peer mediation programs before? What do they look like? How could we implement something like that? I think that was the topic of it.
It's all of the money.
Clem's always very creative
But we
about
got-
certainly
we got-
allowing and getting it done. Okay.
You just need people with passion.
Our leadership class at Henley kind of do like a kindness club type deal. And we all just kind of like, we make sure people aren't getting picked on, and when people are sitting alone at lunch, we go to them. It's, honestly, you guys should talk to leadership classes. They have a passion for making the school better, and the way to get those is those people.
Good kindness club, is that what you
Yeah.
said? What it's called, kindness, gonna take a picture. Kids.
Okay, thanks.
If you take them.
Okay, anything else? We talked about like moving in. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Rose, go ahead.
The service.